Daniel Ricciardo's having an absolute roller coaster of an offseason as he looks set to lose his McLaren seat to fellow Aussie Oscar Piastri at the end of this year. And while all rumors are now pointing toward a return to Alpine, former F1 driver Ralf Schumacher thinks that the Honey Badger's time in the sport could very well be over. Is there an actual chance of that happening though? Well, keep watching to find out. First up, how Daniel Ricciardo lost this round of F1 musical chairs. Formula One can be a pretty brutal sport at times, with drivers losing their seats on the grid for no particular reason. In a lot of cases, having that sponsorship or team backing's more important than pure driver ability. Daniel Ricciardo's been one of those drivers who has had both of those things helping him throughout his career. Over the past couple of years though, it seems like he's kinda lost his mojo, as he just hasn't been able to perform up to his usual high standards ever since his McLaren switch. Plus, with so many promising youngsters coming through the ranks, there's been a pretty massive buildup of pressure behind him as well. The first domino actually fell during this season's summer break, when Fernando Alonso announced his sensational exit from Alpine to fill in the gap that Sebastian Vettel's leaving at Aston Martin. Now, if you don't know, the French team was always planning on replacing the Spaniard at the end of next season and promoting the youngster Oscar Piastri next to Ocon. With this insane move though, Alonso kinda shook up the entire grid, as even Piastri denied Alpine's announcement that he was going to race for them next season, and instead, he's slated to get into that McLaren's cockpit next season, which obviously means that Ricciardo's gotta leave. Where the Honey Badger goes now, well, that's a whole other story. That said, Ralf Schumacher thinks that it's time for him to call it quits. Next up, Schumacher says his nephew could kick Ricciardo out of F1. With Daniel Ricciardo struggling for form, it would be kinda risky for Alpine to bring him back into the team. Plus, it's not like they haven't got other options to choose from on the grid. For instance, even someone like Alex Albon's been touted to move up from Williams. According to Ralf Schumacher though, the Australian's exit from the sport's almost a given. Why, you ask? Well, apparently, he thinks that every cockpit on the grid's been accounted for, with multiple people fighting for a single spot. Even though the Honey Badgers definitely got bundles of experience under his belt, he hasn't really shown that he's capable of using it when his team's struggling. If anything, he actually made a bit of a habit to always trail behind his young teammate, Lando Norris, which obviously doesn't bode well for his future. We mean, the French outfit's still trying to grow into one of the top teams after their transition from Renault. So a veteran driver who can kinda replicate Alonso would definitely help, but the German seems to think that the 33-year-old just isn't that person anymore. In fact, for him, his nephew and Michael Schumacher's son, Mick Schumacher, would be a much better option for Alpine, as he's out of contract after next year, and is probably faster than Danny Ric at this point in his career. Besides, Nico Hülkenberg's also lurking around the paddock, trying to find a seat for next season. Now, Schumacher criticizes Alpine for how they've handled everything. Okay, so while it's true that Alonso kinda snubbed Alpine by announcing his move to Aston Martin without letting them know, it's not like they've done themselves any favors either. We mean, apparently the plan was to keep the Spanish legend as a seat warmer for Oscar Piastri until the end of 2023, which, to be honest, sounds kinda disrespectful to someone like Alonso. And perhaps he needed to do that to tell them what he's actually worth. After all, even at 41 years old, which is incredibly old for an F1 driver, he continues to prove why he's one of the most technically gifted drivers of all time. So maybe they should have shown him a little more respect. That's not all though, because according to Ralf, the team's treatment of Piastri wasn't great either. Obviously, he's their current reserve driver and is contracted with the team until the end of the season, but that certainly doesn't give them the right to announce that he's gonna be driving for them without actually asking him about it. Like, we kinda get why they've done it, as there must have been some gentleman's agreement in place at some point. That said, it seems like they were actually looking looking to stall the young Aussie for a couple of years before bringing him in, which again is a major screw-up. Also, the Germans actually siding with Oscar Piastri on this one. Now, whether Alpine wanted to bring Piastri into the fray this season or not is kinda irrelevant at this point. After all, they did announce that he'd be racing for them next season after that Alonso snub. That said, after he denied the announcement, it kinda left an impression that something had gone horribly wrong along the way. And according to Ralf Schumacher, it's the way that they treated such a young, promising talent that's the problem. Of course, the speed of Formula 1 isn't limited to the track only, as things can change really quickly off it as well. So perhaps the reigning F2 champion just switched sides and contacted McLaren, thinking that he wouldn't be getting into the seat next to Ocon for at least a couple more years. Obviously, you could say that he's betrayed the team that's invested so much time and effort into him. Schumacher, on the other hand, thinks that it's criminal to make a young jewel like the 21-year-old sit around like that, and that you can't really blame him for not waiting. Besides, it's your fault for not designing the contracts correctly in the first place. Oh, and apparently, the reason why the former F1 driver seems to be so sure of Piastri's move to McLaren is the fact that he's got Mark Webber as his manager, who's obviously got some strong connections to the British team's boss, Andreas Seidel. But Alpine boss still seems to prefer Ricciardo over young blood. Now, while it's true that many people would love to see someone young and aggressive like Mick Schumacher or Alex Albon move up into that second Alpine seat, the chances of that actually happening aren't as high as you'd think. Despite his current form and everything that he's been through over the past few years, Daniel Ricciardo's still a proven and experienced race winner, which is something that's very hard to come by these days. Plus, his struggles could honestly be just because of a bad car that doesn't suit his style. After all, he did kinda have a pretty decent spell at Renault before his McLaren move. Oh, and then there's the fact that he's still very much liked within the French team. Their relatively new boss, Otmar Safnauer, is apparently a pretty big fan of the Honey Badger's racecraft. And according to him, Danny Ric's still got at least 3 or 4 seasons in his tank. At the same time though, he kinda refused to confirm anything and said that they're keeping their options open and looking at different prospects. Besides, they've got to make sure that the other driver gels in with Ocon as well, who can be a difficult character to deal with. Also, let's not forget that the 33-year-old Aussie scored 119 points during his 2020 run with the team, which was not only the constructors' highest tally since their return to sport in 2016, but still remains unsurpassed to this day. So could we actually see Ricciardo leave F1 after this year? With so many opinions floating around the paddock during the silly season, it's easy to get lost within the rumor mill and forget about the fact that Daniel Ricciardo's still a perfectly capable race car driver. Plus, there's the fact that he's got one of the most likable personalities on the grid, which can be a massive selling point for any outfit. After all, no one wants a hot-headed driver on their team anymore. And to be honest, that's doubly true for Alpine, who, again, have Ocon in the other seat. Also, it would be weird for someone like the Honey Badger to fail to find a seat. We mean, obviously, that could always happen because Formula 1's an unpredictable sport. It's just that, with the sheer amount of experience and race wins that he's got under his belt, he's still incredibly valuable. Oh, and then there's the whole marketing side of things, which people also tend to forget sometimes. After all, the 33-year-old is a household name in his home country and continues to bring in a ton of sponsorship money and his massive fan following to the sport. So honestly, it would be incredibly shocking if Ricciardo doesn't end up moving back to Alpine at the end of this season. That's a wrap for this video. Where do you think the Aussie will go after his stint at McLaren comes to an end? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.